Hello, and welcome back to the Forest Garden. And a big welcome to all of those of you who are new to the channel. I see that about a third of you subscribed because of that Mugwort Dreams video. Well, this one's not like that, but there will be more. It's been a rather challenging month or so since that last video, that potato wine tasting Christmassy one. First with the extreme wet in the form of flooding, even though it was my own fault, and then with the extreme cold in the form of frozen water pipes and frozen everything else. It was fun for a day or two, trekking to the nearest flowing spring, collecting water several times a day, and smashing bananas out of their skins with a rolling pin for breakfast. But the romance and amusement of that wore off after a couple of days. But those of you who subscribe to the free Forest Garden newsletter will have read all about that already. Incidentally, I've a new website under construction, designed by divsmart.com. It's nearing completion, and the address, if this works, is robsfoodforest.site. There's a button about halfway down that page you may click on to get a free Forest Garden newsletter each month with what's been going on here in the food forest. It's been a while since the last video, so thank you for being patient for this one. It's not as diverse or visually pleasing as some that I have planned for a little later in the year, but it's a good start nonetheless. As you must have seen from the title of this video, it's a Q&A. That means questions and answers. I have here, I keep looking at, I've got my laptop with some of the most asked general questions from over the last year from under the YouTube, the comments under the videos, and some more specific individual questions from my patrons through Patreon, including questions about ducks, bees, shampoo, real poo, greenhouse plants, how to plan a forest garden, seed saving, plus a few more. It was mucky, wet and grey outside this morning, but just as I've decided I'd had enough, I came inside for a warm-up. The sun decided to make an appearance, and then a whole murmuration of starlings descended upon the oak tree just outside there. Quite incredible. But it's certainly not freezing anymore, and I must say I'm mightily glad of that. I'll just play the theme tune for 20 seconds or so, whilst I get my mind and my notes together. See you in a minute. On a hill
near a wood,
where nobody goes,
up a track,
through a gate,
The food forest grows
with secrets and treasures for everyone's pleasure, and Rob's Discovery. Hello again. My patrons on Patreon said they liked the new text over the title sequence, and the consensus was that it should be kept just to one colour, i.e. white, and to one font style, ideally. But the trouble is, I've accidentally deleted the original footage, so now apart from going through the laborious task of trying to harvest all the individual clips from YouTube and re-edit it, I'm stuck with it as it is, so sorry about that. I may redo it all again at some point anyway with some updated footage. First question. A question from Alessandra. I wonder how you got your genius plant system worked out. Have you studied this? Or is it all self-taught? Okay, I did read through these questions just now to think of the answers, but well, thank you, Alessandra, for calling my plant system genius. At times, I'd agree with that. but more because of the genius of the adaptability of the plants rather than my planning. I just start them off in whatever I consider to be the right place, and they find their own way to where they're happiest. Especially those walking onions, got to watch those. Not so much the trees, although looking at it from a much longer timescale perspective, they do move about, sometimes at night. They think I'm not looking. But that's another story. Most of the credit for the planning of this plot comes from one book called Creating a Forest Garden by Martin Crawford, Working with Nature to Grow Edible Crops. So yes, all self-taught, but mostly from this book. But you also pick things up, don't you, like from permaculture internet forums and magazines and the like. I suppose it also helps that every Tuesday for years I've worked in a nearby established forest garden created by Bryony Huntley. I'll put a link to a video with her in here somewhere. But that's given me a rather excellent insight into what would work in this area or not. Although having said that, her place is the other side of the lake, 5 miles or so to the north, and the soil and climate are rather different to here. It's got way more sun and the soil is rather clayey and claggy, but it's useful to observe and take the occasional cutting. Fire's going out. Just need to top it up with another log. There you go, Calcifer. Well, really, I just looked through this book, making a note of which plants I'd like to grow, which was pretty much all of them, and chose the ones that I thought would be most suitable for the land here. Cross-selected with all the tastiest looking ones, which again was pretty much all of them. There was much to take into consideration when it came to where, how, and indeed when to plant them, but I just followed the advice in the book, and it's been okay so far. In year 1 I planted all the perimeter hedging to give that a head start getting established. Then in year 2 all the upper canopy trees, the understory trees, the orchard section, the shorter fruiting shrubs and windbreak bushes, and in subsequent years I've since been working on everything else. The perennial vegetable areas, the wildflowers, the vines, the climbers, the aquatic and wetland areas, and the subterranean fungal layer. My secret planning strategy though, although no, not so secret, was loads of bamboo canes and loads of labels. I wrote out the 470 odd labels of all the things I wanted to plant. Everything from trees, perennial vegetables, the wildflowers, the vines and mushrooms. And I strapped those labels to the bamboo canes with cable ties and walked around the plot as often as I could throughout the first year when it was a blank canvas. Although it wasn't really a blank canvas because there are a few specimens I wanted to keep, herbs and wildflowers and the like. And I stuck a cane in the ground so as not to accidentally plant over those things. And as I walked around, I visualised how big everything might grow and where it might potentially like to spread, and stuck a cane in the ground where I thought approximately was best, roughly in the right place to begin with, and then as I learned about their needs and tendencies, moved the canes accordingly. For example, I'll plant this Elaeagnus here. It'll get about 10 feet tall, and its roots will extend downhill following the moisture, and it doesn't need wet soggy ground. But then, oh no, a eucalyptus, that's going to be growing to the south of it and it's going to block out all its light, so I better move it this way a bit. And then aha, the rhubarb-like shade, so that can go to the north of the Elaeagnus, and the Elaeagnus can feed it through its nitrogen fixing roots. And these perennial leeks, they like the sun, so they can go to the south of it where the ground is already nitrogen rich, indicated by this huge patch of nettles, which I'll leave here to harbour the ladybirds, to eat any aphids from the rhubarb, and oh no, the ground will be bare around this asparagus, so what's a good shallow-rooted companion that also likes sun and shelter? Strawberries! In goes the label, etc, etc. And quite often I didn't take this skirt heavy book round with me. I just stood in the field staring at my mobile phone whilst looking things up, like what is a good companion for gooseberries, what does marjoram keep away, atactule, and so on and so on. It was like a huge game of chess, one that I'm still playing. Or you can do no planning at all and just see what happens, which I'm a great advocate of that as well. Which I suppose is a good way to answer the next question, which is, what's the difference between rewilding and forest gardening? And don't you dig? Deep breath. I do dig holes to plant things and dig carefully to harvest any root crops. But apart from that, no. There's much information on the internet about the benefits of no-dig gardening, especially from the no-dig king, Charles Dowding. Mulch is the main solution for not digging. Compost is ideal if you have it in large enough quantities, which I do not at the moment. I use wood chips. They suppress the weedy competition around the desired trees or plants. It regulates the temperature of the soil. It feeds and locks in moisture to the soil, eventually creating new soil, which in turn feeds and waters the trees and plants. It increases biodiversity in the garden in the form of worms and encourages insects and birds and other animals into the garden, which control many pests. It's fantastic for the environment and it's practically free. So why would anyone dig? Sorry, I had to go and see those geese. Still honking though. They must have found a rat in their grain bucket again and are attacking it maybe. Digging. Yes, why would anyone dig? I suppose some find it therapeutic and find it satisfying to see a freshly dug veg bed, which I do too sometimes, especially when it comes to planting my comparatively teeny tiny patches of annual veg out there. But the advantages of not digging so outweigh digging that it makes a lot of sense not to me at least. I attended a talk by Charles Dowding, the no-dig king himself, a few years ago, the summary of which was, well, as I said, which I got from him originally, not digging not only saves time, but also reduces the number of weeds and moisture loss. In fact, moisture is retained because fresh soil isn't exposed to the dry air in your diggings or cultivations. And weeds really do grow less, and the few that do grow are far easier to hoe or to pull out. It improves the soil structure so that plants are able to anchor themselves well against the wind, and difficult vegetables become easier to grow. And good structure means you can put a foot on or even walk on the beds if you need to, saving unnecessary bending to reach the middle, which I'm all in favour of as well. I made some notes here so I wouldn't have to remember it all. So just rereading those. Yeah, soil structure. This also helpful soil organisms, many of which are killed or at the very least disturbed by cultivating the soil, they can thrive, such as the numerous fine threads of mycorrhizal fungi which plants use to help them find nutrients and moisture. There's a good symbiotic exchange going on there, if you let it. I really hope to do this in one take, but I keep forgetting things. Wood chips. At the moment, I have them delivered as regularly as possible, but eventually the forest garden will create its own mulch and biomass from fallen leaves and dead and pruned branches. But until then, the occasional ton or two from a kindly tree surgeon is a brilliant way to kickstart the ecosystem. And that reminds me, there's a question in a minute about soil building plants, but I'll just answer the first part of this question, the one about rewilding versus forest gardening. So what is rewilding? The way I manage my forest garden is extremely minimal, so it does have a wild look about it and many true wild aspects, though it is still actually managed, and its primary purpose is to produce food for people to eat. It just happens to be done in such a way that it feeds and houses a lot of wildlife as well, many of which are species beneficial to maintaining this miniature ecosystem. It's not left alone completely, and if there were nothing to eat in it that people could directly consume, it would be considered a failure. All that is a rather convoluted way of saying that a food forest is planned, whereas a rewilding project is not. Well, not nearly as planned anyway. Rewilding is one of those terms that one hears, but is rather hard to pin down to a specific definition. Oh, needed some thinking time then. I see rewilding as a process where an area of land, although you can also rewild yourself apparently nowadays, where an area of land is actively worked to bring it back to a wild state that is fully incorporated within the local environment and supports local wildlife. The area should have a wild feel to it when it's all done, despite being crafted by human hands, though it's true that some rewilding projects are simply fenced off and left for years. Food forests and many other branches of permaculture branches result in this wild feel also. So if permaculture practices result in rewilding, why bother with a different term? It really comes down to why you do something, and the why behind rewilding, I believe, is to restore the land to a more wild state, and the why behind permaculture, which remember forest gardening is a branch of, is to create a system that works with nature to provide a harvest. And a rewilded landscape doesn't have to return a direct harvest, whereas a permaculture system really should, in most cases. But there is room to combine rewilding and agroforestry, or forest gardening, or permaculture, to create an even better permaculture design. Clear as a swamp? Yep, thought so. I was determined to record all this in one take. I don't really want to reiterate all that. If I try and do it again and simplify it, I'll only mess it up and get tongue-tied. So, on to the next question. Adam from Poland asked, he asked 3 questions actually. How many ducks do you have? Drakes and ducks. Simple question, why can't I think? How many ducks do I have? At this very moment, I have 7 ducks and 3 drakes. Possibly only 2 drakes, but the one who I suspect is a drake isn't acting all that drake-like, so I'm not sure. He or she is still quite young though, so we'll see if he lays an egg in the springtime or not. That'll soon tell what he is. They're all khaki Campbell ducks, by the way, because they are the best slug eaters, and it's said that you need about 6 ducks per acre to keep the slug population under control, and I have 2.5 acres here, so another few ducks would be ideal. But again, we'll see if the springtime brings any broodiness amongst them and see if we can have any more ducklings. It's been 2 years since the arrival of the ducks, and it really is working. Though as the ducks are also a little too fond of amphibians, the frog population has unfortunately taken a hit also, hence the piles of logs and rocks around the site to give them a place to hide during the day. And not that you asked about the geese, but there are 4 resident geese here, 2 geese and 2 ganders. Is your greenhouse called geodesic type? I saw you planted avocado, pineapple, lemon. Is it possible to plant in that type of greenhouse the tropical plants? For example, when I'll install the heater. I wouldn't call my greenhouse the geodesic type, no. I'd call it an abomination. It's just some old scaffolding poles connected together in whatever way I could get them to fit, with old polytunnel plastic stretched over the top of it all. It's been functional enough for the past 6 years, but it really is time to rebuild it now. Now that you've mentioned it, maybe I will go with a geodesic design this time and make one of those domes. You can get kits where you buy the little hubs that you connect spokes to. It's really quite easy and cheap, so maybe this year actually. I need to find out about that. But yes, it's been fine for the past 6 years, but it does have a unique and most beneficial feature, and that is that it's sunk into the ground, by which I mean I dug a big hole, or had it dug, and piled the earth up around the outside, which acts as a thermal mass, not only insulating it against the cold, but acting as a heat sink to gather heat during the day and then radiate it back at night, so it never freezes in there. And it's worked so far. Mostly. Alright, girls. Excuse me. And with regards to what I grow in there, yes, there are avocados. Well, the trees at least. No fruit yet. They're still a bit young. Lemons, grapes, apricots, peaches. But those things would grow outside here anyway. Not necessarily very well. And they wouldn't necessarily survive the winter if their roots freeze, but they certainly do much better in the greenhouse. Plus the birds don't eat all the fruit. Well, actually they do now. The blackbirds get in because the greenhouse is falling to pieces. There's a lot more to say about growing those particular fruits, but nothing that can't easily be found elsewhere on the internet. And lemons really are the easiest. Question 3 from Adam. New film, new film, new film, new film, new film. Oh, thanks. Well, here's one. Not really a question. I hope you're happy with this. Question from Anna, one of my precious patrons from Patreon. I'm interested in how you deal with your waste. Are you able to reuse, recycle all or most of what you produce in this regards? You may have covered this already, so forgive me if so. That's quite alright, Hannah. Which type of waste do you mean? Do you mean plastic type waste that would go to landfill? Do you mean kitchen vegetable peelings type waste or toilet waste? Well, just to thoroughly cover it, I shall answer all 3. With regards to plastic waste, it really is difficult to avoid, even if you do try to grow most of your own food, because everything comes wrapped in blooming plastic these days, doesn't it? Even though it doesn't need to be. And when ordering things from the internet, you can ask how things will be packaged beforehand and decline if you don't agree with their wrapping methods, but it's still quite difficult. Again, there is much advice on the internet about avoiding single-use plastic and how to become zero waste. And I'm still proud to say that it's been almost exactly 2 years now since I last put a bin out for collection. I do try to avoid shopping or buying anything that's wrapped in plastic, but the few things... Alright girls, so noisy today. The few things I've not managed to avoid so far, I stuff them all into 2-litre plastic bottles after washing and drying the plastic, and make what's known as eco bricks. It's the things like toothpaste tubes, even though I hope to make my own sometime soon, and cellophane and bubble wrap and stuff like that I put into them, the non-recyclable stuff. There are hubs popping up all over the place now that collect these so-called eco bricks, if they're up to a certain weight and standard. There are specifications on the website, and then they use them for community building projects, but I'm keeping mine here on site to teach me the lesson of having to deal with my own waste. I will build something from them eventually, when I have enough. Maybe a little cold frame or something. I have 24 eco bricks at the moment, so it's averaging about 1 per month I'm producing. Although it's getting a bit tricky now, because there are things like Wellington boots that I get through a pair of a year, and what do I do with those? And there are only so many I can nail up as birdhouses. But if you'd like to know more about eco bricks, I'll add a button here or somewhere, so you can click on it and watch a video with me explaining more about eco bricks and making my first eco brick. Vegetable peelings go into the compost and make, well, compost. Food waste, well, there's absolutely never any food waste. If I make too much of something, I eat it. If I burn it or a recipe goes wrong, I eat it anyway. And if it's going off, which seldom happens, then the chickens eat it. If they won't, the geese eat it. And as for toilet waste, oh, it's not waste. Such valuable stuff. I transfer it from the holding chamber of my dry toilet, where it's been mixed with wood shavings or wood ash, whatever absorbent material was to hand at the time, and put it in one of those Dalek-shaped composters for 3 to 5 years until it's turned to soil, and I can be sure that all the pathogens are completely gone. And does it smell? Not a bit. And that's coming from someone with a nose like a dog. It perhaps would smell a bit if it was allowed to mix with urine, but there's a separator in the toilet that channels it off to be used elsewhere in the garden. Can you give some examples of companion planting plants? I did make a video about that a couple of years ago, but it wasn't that good. I do try to include examples of it in the videos I make though, like the one I made in the autumn about sweet potatoes, where I used feverfew to keep the sweet potatoes weevil free. Not that it worked that time, because there was no crop to protect in the end. For all of you to whom it's a new concept, companion planting, it's as it sounds. It's where you plant plants and trees near each other that have beneficial interactions, be it due to pollination, pest control, maximisation of space, or the sharing of nutrients, etc. But the basic example, the one that's used all the time, is the three sisters, and I believe that is sweet corn, squashes and runner beans. And the idea is that beans, being nitrogen fixers, take nitrogen from the air, put it into the ground that feeds the hungry sweet corn and the squashes. The sweet corn that you plant first provides a structure for the runner beans to run up instead of canes, and the squashes cling on to the lower half of their strong stems, and the squashes provide a ground cover that suppresses the weeds and locks in the moisture. So all those three grow really well together, and you can plant them in a little plot all together to save space rather than planting them separately, which is a waste of space. That's the basic example of companion planting. There's also the advice given in all those Victory Garden Second World War guides of planting onions and carrots together, because carrots keep away the pests of onions and vice versa. There's my own three sisters method that I've researched, and that is gooseberries, tomatoes and marjoram. I've had great success with those three. You have a few gooseberry bushes, and you grow marjoram as a ground cover, and you grow tomatoes through the gooseberry bushes. The tomatoes keep away the sawfly that normally strip the gooseberry leaves off. The marjoram keeps away the pest of the tomatoes when it's disturbed, when you release the essential oils, but also keeps the ground weed free and locks in the moisture. The gooseberries provide a structure for the tomatoes to climb up through, and the prickles of the gooseberries protect the tomato fruits from the birds. And there are a few other beneficial relationships there, but I can't remember them off the top of my head. other things I plant together. Well, everything's companion planted, but just whilst I think of it, melons and sunflowers. It's quite difficult to grow melons outdoors in this country unless you grow them with sunflowers. I do have annual sunflowers growing here, but I've planted my melons with my perennial sunflowers, the Helianthus maximiliani, and they keep away each other's pests, but also the sunflower stalks give something for the melons to ramble through and protect them from the harsh sun and make them a bit warmer under there. The melons are shallow rooted, the sunflowers are deeper rooted, so they don't interfere with each other, and there are many other reasons why, but I forget at the moment. I started off by growing honeydew and cantaloupe melons, but over the years they've crossbred to make a unique hybrid. Rob's Forest Garden melons, perhaps, because I save the seeds every year from the melons, and now they've adapted into something that does very well here. So many more examples. Strawberries are pretty much a companion for everything, except perhaps fennel. Fennel doesn't like anything growing near it. It has allopathic properties and prevents things from growing. But I grow strawberries amongst my Swiss chard, amongst the rhubarb, although that's actually, the rhubarb shades most things out, and over the asparagus, because it's very difficult to hoe asparagus because the roots, some of the roots are near the surface and you can accidentally cut off the new growth. So I grow strawberries, and again, keeps it relatively weed-free, locks in the moisture, and plus you get strawberries as well. A few more questions. I won't be able to include all of them, unfortunately, but I'll just answer a few more. What's my favourite part of the garden? Jasmine asks. Difficult one, but from the top of my head, I love going into the greenhouse in April. I take my coffee in there if I'm home and not working at the morning time. Between 10 and 11 o'clock in the morning I spend an hour in the greenhouse, and in April it's still too cold to sit outside with my coffee, and the greenhouse isn't too hot to spend time in, and it's just that unique little window of time, and an hour in the morning in April with some jam on toast, a mug of coffee and a good storybook. And also it's the time when the apricot tree in the greenhouse is in blossom. I suppose that's why it's called an apricot. Apricot, it blossoms in April. But the aroma, the sweet sickly aroma, is just heavenly in the greenhouse. I love that. Drinking water. Where does my drinking water come from? I do believe I've mentioned that in a video before. Or was it? I think it was on an Instagram video actually. It wasn't a YouTube video. I won't go into too much detail, but it's all spring water. But the water I drink directly, I get from a spring that's not on my land, and I go several times a day to collect it in receptacles, and I can drink that as it is. And that's quite a mineral-rich alkaline water. But I have another spring. It's just a trickle of a spring on the land that's not quite as good quality, and I collect that in a header tank under the ground, and then I pump it with an electrical solar-powered pump to where it needs to be. There's also a gravity-fed tap lower down, but I don't use that very much at the moment. And that water I have to boil before drinking, and I use that for watering and washing and cooking. And I do drink it as well, but not as often as the other spring water. And I buy a testing kit twice a year from the internet, because the spring water, although it comes from deep under the Mendip Hills and is filtered through the limestone rock, sometimes other things might get into it, like nitrites or nitrates and heavy metals, so I do test it a couple of times a year. Talk more about soil building plants. That's Angela, one of my patrons, asks. Oh, this really does deserve a dedicated episode, but just from the top of my head, soil building plants, really important here. There are, of course, the nitrogen fixing trees and shrubs, like the Elaeagnuses, the Elaeagnus umbellata, the Elaeagnus multiflora. There are the broom trees, there's the bog myrtle or wax myrtle. Oh, and there are the nitrogen fixing powerhouses, the Italian red alders that I high prune, so they pop out the top of the canopy and don't interfere with the light for anything else. They nitrogen fix in two ways. They put nitrogen into the ground through their roots via the Frankia bacteria, I believe, the little nodules on their roots, and also their leaves fall pretty much constantly throughout the year, but mostly in autumn, creating an even mulch over the ground. But there are other nitrogen fixing plants. I mean, the king of nitrogen not nitrogen fixers, the king of soil builders is comfrey. I do encourage a lot of comfrey to grow here, and it's one of those chop and drop soil builders. You can chop it down 4 or 5 times a year, leave it where it is on the ground, and it just keeps coming back. And it has myriad uses medicinally, and it's brilliant for the bees. It's called bone knit locally around here. I think you can mash it into a poultice and stick it on a broken bone to help it heal. But yes, it's like a really good a mining plant. It's got a taproot that goes down 6 feet into the ground. It brings up all the minerals from the subsoil that the shallower rooted plants haven't got access to, and it accumulates those minerals in its leaves. And when it dies, or when you chop it down, those minerals then go into the soil on the top, where it can be absorbed by the other plants. And it's very good at breaking up the soil, as are docks and hogweed as well. Lots of people really don't like docks. If they see a field full of docks, they'll think the field is going to ruin. But really, it's just nature's way of turning that field back into a forest. Oh dear. I've been recording this video for so long, it's got dark outside, I had to put the lights on. How do you afford to run 2 vehicles on such a small budget? I know who this question's from. Many of you will have noticed in the videos that I do have 2 vehicles. I have a Land Rover and a Volkswagen Polo. The Land Rover I use for business, for work, that's my gardening vehicle. And the Volkswagen Polo is for social, domestic and pleasure. Well, to start with, the Land Rover doesn't really cost anything. It's 61 years old now. I can service it myself, mostly, and because I don't use it nearly as much as the car, I don't do as many miles in it, so it doesn't need servicing very often. It's really simple to work on, and the only cost really is parts and oil occasionally. It's tax exempt, I don't have to pay tax. It's MOT exempt, so I don't have to put it through an MOT, although I do each year anyway, just to be safe. The insurance, because it's classic insurance, is really, really cheap. So really, it's just the Polo that costs to keep it on the road. And yes, it's a little bit of an extravagance having 2 vehicles, but that's my hobby really. I just love Land Rovers. And it only costs the same having those 2 vehicles as it would having a slightly more expensive car. But the Polo is pretty cheap to run anyway. It's incredibly economical actually. Quite often I get 80 miles to the gallon with it, which is phenomenal actually. It's only a little 3-cylinder. Just a couple more questions. One of my patrons from Texas, Kitty, she asked me about shampoo. What I use for shampoo, I believe it was. And yes, I've got to be very careful what I use, because anything that I use runs from the shower shed straight into the duck pond and then down through a series of other aquatic vegetable beds before being absorbed by the land. So I make my own shampoo from, simple name, soapwort, Saponaria officinalis, and it's one of those plants that people don't like in a modern day garden. It's so thuggish, it spreads everywhere, so it's isolated on its own little bed. I actually grow it with periwinkles. They're a brilliant companion to it, and periwinkles, both major and minor, have some edible properties. I haven't tried eating them yet, but soapwort would have been very at home in a medieval garden to be used as soap. It's a very mild form of soap. it contains quite a lot of saponins, many more saponins in the roots than the leaves, but I often can't be bothered to dig the roots up. But once every couple of weeks, I strip some leaves off, I mash them up in a pestle and mortar, and then pour, that's to break open the cells, I pour boiling water on them, and then after that water has cooled a little, I add a dash of apple cider vinegar, and there I've got my jug of soap for the week, and I can lather up my hair with it, although it doesn't really make a lather, so it doesn't feel like it's doing anything, but afterwards my hair feels squeaky clean and shiny. And I can wash my smaller clothes with it. If I leave my clothes in the sink overnight, I'm in that solution soaking, by the morning I just rinse them out, hang them up to dry, and they're pretty clean. And with regards to my other washing, I believe that Karu, you had loads of questions for me, but one of them was about, what was it? I was wondering if you use products such as toothpaste, soap and shampoo to maintain your beautiful hair. Thank you. Can those products be drained to the land if you use natural products? Oh, I suppose I just answered that, didn't I, with Kitty's question. Please do a video on sustainable hygiene, personal hygiene care. Yes, okay, I will. And how do you do your laundry? Well, I was hoping to build a washing machine, and actually when the water's flowing really fast in the river nearby, I can do my washing there. But to be honest, whilst my grandmother still lives, I take my washing down to her once a week to do it. That's the things I don't wash in the sink. That's the bigger things, like my bedding and my work trousers. So I do cheat a little bit in that way. Can you use a vacuum cleaner with your electric system? I'm assuming not yet. Well, actually, I can. I do have off-grid solar power. Again, I made a video about how that works. And I do have 240 volt electric, but the wattage isn't nearly high enough for the vacuum cleaner. It would just cut out straight away when I switched it on. But I do have a very old vacuum cleaner. That's my grandmother's. It's about 700 watts. And I have a backup petrol generator that I sometimes start in the winter, but I can only justify starting it when I've got loads of stuff plugged in. So when I start the generator, perhaps for an hour a day in the winter, I've got it connected so it charges up all my batteries, all my devices at once, and whilst it's running, so as not to waste the 1,000 watts it produces, I use my vacuum cleaner. I plug it in the yurt in here, and I quickly vacuum up, then in the shepherd's hut and in the caravan. So yes. Okay, this video has become exceedingly long, and I'm sorry not to have been able to answer all of your questions. There are some other really good ones actually, but I still have them written down here. But this video has gone on long enough, but I will try to include them next time. By which time the questions will probably no longer be relevant. But please do ask any more questions you have in the comments under this video, or you can correct me if you disagree with anything that I've said, because, well, that's how we learn, isn't it? I've been asked a lot to do a live video, and I did try one last year actually, but the signal here was so poor with the internet that it kept dropping out, and I can't even upload this video. I have to go somewhere else to borrow a proper Wi-Fi connection to upload it. But that's a small price to pay. That's a small price to pay for being in an area that's more or less electromagnetic frequency free. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and see you soon. It's actually pancake day today, so I'm off to use up all those rich ingredients in my larder. What do I need to make pancakes? Flour, fat, raisins. Oh, and lemons. I've got some lemons in the greenhouse. Bye.